Hello and welcome everyone into the Gamecock Central Live Postgame Show. I am your host, intern Joe Macheca. Joined with me this week is former Gamecock offensive lineman Garrett Anderson, the one, the only. Garrett, how we feeling?
Bad.
Yeah.
I feel like every year we're due for one game where it makes every Carolina fan question whether or not they should be a part of this fandom. I think it was Tennessee in 2012. This is definitely one of those games. There's not a lot good to be said about it. And, this is always that like rock bottom part of the year where you got to hope we start heading in the right direction. I mean, it's offense, it's defense. I felt like, especially watching Rattler and a lot of the stuff on the offense, looks like a lot of the players, and this is just all speculation, but they're not happy with this either. They're trying to get really frustrated with either it's the play calling or their teammates or something, but the team is not happy. And you can see the camaraderie, you can see the output. It's not it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think they just failed to execute in all phases, offensively, defensively. I mean, that big bomb to Burden, you're double covered there, but you just got to find a way to poke it out. And it's the little things, right? Like we've talked about it. Mike and I have talked about it. I'm sure we've talked about it on previous post-game shows. When this team executes to their fullest ability, they can do good things, but they need to do everything right in order, especially as banged up as they are. And we'll get to the injuries because, man, oh, man, it felt like every other play someone was going out. But, you needed to execute in every facet. This Mizzou team is really, really, really good, and they showed it. But, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, you didn't execute offensively, defensively. There were good things from everyone, but ultimately you got to find a way to get the job done. You were there, you were in the game, and that second half push, I mean, that should have come a lot earlier. If you're South Carolina, you needed that push very early in the game, not, as time is expiring and they're already up 27-3, I think it was at that point when you were still pushing, and then you let up 10 in the fourth. But Garrett, I mean, so one of the bigger complaints this weekend, or from this game at least, is the offensive line. You played offensive line. Kind of just walk me through what you saw from those guys, as banged up as they were.
Sure. I mean, it's going to be kind of all encompassing, but we're still. I've had a lot of conversation on Facebook today. I had a lot of people preseason. They were talking about a 10-win team, and I was the one saying 6-6, and I feel like you always want to try to be. I mean, I was a person who was saying 7-5 last year, and we've had a lot of years with Shane where we have done better than our projections. And this was one of those years where look at the talent, look at the schedule. This is a 6-6 team, and I'm hoping we get to 6-6. I hate to say that now, but looking at, correct if I'm wrong, with 2-5, we got 4 wins and 1 losses left on the schedule to get 6-6. That's not where you want to be, but all that gets to the point. We're still working with freshmen in the SEC on the offensive line. Unless you have a freak of nature like that guy that Miami has, you should not be starting freshmen in the SEC. And the worst part about it, too, is that, and I felt like this was kind of the epitome of the issue on offense today and a little bit on defense, but more on the offensive side. We have been kind of just putting it together to win games this season. We've got enough film so far for the other teams to realize, hey, this is where this, freshman tackle is not good at blocking. And there were so many times where Creed just got ran by. I think we have finally got to the point in the season where for a defensive coach, they just got to pull up the film, put it all together, and put together a very solid game plan. We've got to get it figured out. And I still think that the issues offensive line wise is that we just don't have the dudes, and you don't fix that middle of the season. I think that we have had, and I mentioned this on Facebook, but this is the same team a month ago that we were up against Georgia, the number 1 team in the nation, at halftime. We have the pieces to put it together, but I think that we've also got to evolve as an offensive staff and team in general, and essentially redesign the wheel every single week. Because what we're doing right now, and if we try to do the same stuff we did the week prior, Mizzou, clearly a well-coached team. They came together with a very solid game plan that was going to beat what we were doing. And we got beat constantly. I think what we saw at halftime was good halftime adjustments, but clearly it's just not enough.
Yeah, absolutely not enough. And too little, too late. When you're on the road in the SEC,
Correct.
You really need to jump all over, especially a team like Missouri, who schematically has adjusted in previous games, and Eli Drinkwitz is no pushover when it comes to schematics. So squeaking out the game was going to be harder than it would have been to try to, win the game with some kind of lead, even if you're battling and lose the lead at some point back and forth there in the fourth quarter in that second half. You need to put up more of a fight in the first half. You came out flat, you came out dead, and it screwed you ultimately. And like offensively, you couldn't find any rhythm. And then defensively, you really couldn't stop a nosebleed. And they did better, right? The defense was better. And that's crazy saying that after the Florida loss, because there was a lot of bad, but I mean, still, I think defensively did better, but also still not great. Brady Cook, as you look at the stats, 14 of 24, 198 yards and a touchdown. That Mizzou also ran the ball for 41 carries, 220 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Brady Cook, even with, I don't know if South Carolina actually got to him at all. No, they didn't. So, without
I'm pretty sure it was 0.
Brady Cook, 9 rushes, 64 yards and a touchdown. But Schrader, man, you can't let him go as far as he did in that game. You need some kind of run defense. And that was, I guess, my biggest complaint with this defense, at least, is that you did a very poor job of getting pressure and stopping the run, matching up in the run game. Like I get the MO was to try to get pressure on Brady, and you didn't have a sack, but I mean, he looked a little bit out of his comfort zone, running a little bit more, but clearly not enough. But yeah, you were mismatched in the run game. Schrader's 26 carries for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. That can't happen. He ultimately helped you ice the game, but statistically also, I mean, Nick Harbor, standing out. I mean, out of anybody in this offense, Nick Harbor was the guy that, I can certainly point a finger at and be like, all right, this is a big game for him. That catch was crazy. The one where
he might be talented
coming off, like that's a big boy play. And, I think if the ball that Spencer threw to Omega Blake in the situation where he got picked off, I think if that's to Nick, maybe Nick comes down with it. Omega Blake is a good player, but like in that situation on the road in the SEC game on the line, I think you'd want to trust somebody with a little bit more height, a little bit more length, and so that one's tough. But yeah, I was really impressed with Nick Harbor. He said earlier this week the game seems to be slowing down to him, so you can certainly see it. Right, they're getting a lot better, and in a wide receiver room that's banged up, Xavier Legette and Juice Wells are both out. We'll see the timetable on Legette. Didn't play the second half of that game. Makes you worry a little bit because, you are certainly deep at that position. But, again, you're playing a lot of freshmen, so that's tough for guys to be able to step up in that situation. But, Garrett, anybody that impressed you offensively?
No, and kind of to add on to what you're saying, me and a couple coaches, I think Skarnecki was there as well. We watched a couple of the preseason scrimmages, and one thing that I was watching with Nick Harbor is, I mean, you see the genetic advantage. He's just a physically dominant human, but he was very, very raw when he first got here, and that was a thing that I think a lot of fans were kind of wanting was, we got a 5-star player. We want to be using the new tools that we got, but it doesn't matter how talented they are if the production's not there. And that's one thing that I think the coaching staff, give the little credit where credit's due. Mario Anderson and Nick Harbor have really come along this year. And I feel like for the people that don't get to be behind the curtain, if you were to watch the film from, fall camp, if you were to look at Nick Harbor and Mario Anderson, you might say they might never play. But then you look at the way that we're utilizing them, the way that we're putting them in a position to win. Now, that Omega Blake thing, I have never played receiver. I was fired at the tight end because I couldn't catch a ball. So this is just a fan speaking here. But, I mean, went right through your hands. Yep. I could easily see Spencer having very strong words with him about, I mean, you're giving me a pick because you can't put the hands on the ball that go right through your hands. Stuff like that, you gotta get figured out. Now, I don't know if Nick Harbor being in that spot is the answer, but if we have Nick Harbor plus the rest of the receivers and we become a 10 personnel 4-wide type team, if that opens up the box, let us run more 10 personnel run game and actually use all 4 receivers, and all 4 receivers be threats so you can't just solo cover. That's good down the road. Getting back to the defensive side of things, man, I think the thing you got to talk about is, and I know a lot of fans, and this is coming from a guy who has played and coached, coaching right now a team that's got 4 wins right now after 9 games. At a certain point, you can tell the kids what to do. You can have the right play call. If they don't get it done, they don't get it done. And the sad part about it is, and this is the part that I kind of hate about this industry, is that Clayton White might be a phenomenal coach that knows how to coach players, that calls the right plays. If the kids don't get it done, you have to make a decision at coaching. And it's just a very unfortunate part of the game. I watched the defense coordinator of Florida. I'm blanking on his name right now, but the reason that Mullins got fired at Florida, I watched what he was trying to get done. The guys beneath him were not getting the job done. They weren't coaching the secondary right. They weren't coaching linebackers right. At the end of the day, their defense sucked. And so the whole staff got fired because you didn't make a move on the defensive coordinator. I think Clayton knows what he's doing. I've met the guy. I know he knows the game. But we also understand that at the end of the day, our NIL boosters, our fans, people that are putting all this money and adoration into the game, if the job's not getting done, the job's not getting done. And it sucks, but it's something that's going to have to be discussed. I mean, there was one play in particular, I think it was in the second quarter, but we had a 6-man box. They were running 5 linemen. I think it was 10 personnel, ran inside zone to the left and 20-yard or 15-yard inside zone run. And the reason why is because the D tackle got reached, linebacker didn't scrape over fast enough, and the guy just walked into the end zone. The reason why we're lined up that way is to make sure that we have safety coverage over the top 2 receivers that are over there. And then I'm pretty sure the other safety was there for quarterback pull on the read. The D tackle and the linebacker, that's their job to get that job done. And they did a terrible job at it. At the end of the day, we're not going to fire the D tackle and linebacker. We're going to fire the defensive coordinator. It is what it is. I know what we're doing wrong, but at the end of the day, if we're not getting it done as a group, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes down to execution, right? And we were talking about this before the show, Garrett and I, and you were at the point where Clayton White's job is starting to become in consideration because you haven't seen any improvements. And yes, I get it. You're as banged up as you are, but you kind of knew this going into the season, right? You knew you were banged up at linebacker. You knew you were banged up at DB and defensive line as well. So it's really, really, really tough to do. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if this continues, at some point you need to make adjustments with the current personnel that you have. So it is a big question now. And I think if it continues again, like I said this on the walkthrough on my podcast after the Florida game, is like that this Missouri game was supposed to be a turning point for your whole team, not just your defense, but most importantly your defense. And they just didn't show it. And granted, this is the first week I think we've seen some light out of the defense, making some stops when you need them to, starting to contain, what you should have from the jump in that second half. But you need to come out and be ready to play. If you brought that energy from the jump, I think South Carolina would have had a really, really, really good chance in that game. So it's a tough one, no matter how you spin it. And again, here's a look at the defensive stat. Debo Williams leading your team in tackles. I think, Debo is one of those guys that you need to play well right now and is starting to, at least. Jelon Kilgore, DQ Smith down there as well. But again, you need to just.
But one thing that this statistic just doesn't cover, though, is just talking about missed tackles. And I think that I would, if I was the defensive player, I would hate for the statistic to exist. I know why it doesn't exist, but the amount of arm tackles that we're missing, the amount of times where we're not in position. I mean, the things that don't show up on the statistics, but at the end of the day, it's how you lose games. And honestly, I hope Shane doesn't watch post-game things. I know he's got better things to worry about. But the one thing I would say is that the reason why Mullins got fired at Florida was a handful of things, but the biggest thing was not pulling the trigger sooner. And I mean, clearly, I'm reading some of the comments too, guys. I hear you. Like, it is very frustrating watching a defense stuck. And listen, I'm not putting in NIL money like some of the other guys are. If I was putting, tens of hundreds of $1,000s in this program, I'd be livid. And I hope that I hope that Clayton isn't our only good option at Carolina. I think a lot of fans and guys, we got to understand this. We do not have. I mentioned this on Facebook. We are not Auburn. We are not Alabama. We do not have national championships in our back in our trophy case, and we also don't have the NIL budget. Maybe Clayton White is the best defense coordinator we have right here, but I'm hoping that either he gets it figured out or we are able to pull the trigger quick enough to make moves to get the program in the right direction. And I will say this too. Yeah. The fact that we have Nick Harbor at Carolina with the NIL budget that we have is a miracle. We love Shane in the offseason because the recruiting is way beyond what it should be. But then we get into the game time. And to be honest, what matters is the wins and losses. This is where it sucks. This is where you really want a Jaheim Bell, where you really want to keep all those really big-time NIL guys that we lost But if we don't get the NIL budget fixed, it doesn't matter. I know that doesn't fix the games right now, but understand how all that losing players and not having the NIL budget, this is where it matters. This is where if we had gotten better O-linemen during the NIL, better linebackers in secondary. I mean, hell, we still got freshmen and sophomores starting in secondary in the SEC. That's not going to get it done.
Yeah. And right, like I think we kind of going into the Beamer regime, we knew that this team and program was going to go through a little bit of, I guess, a learning curve, because as well as Shane has done in recruiting, like this is like the first year where some of his guys and the guys that have been hyped up and like coming here based on the, the culture and really buying in, this is the first year that those guys are really seeing the field. So I don't think the fire, Shane is anywhere remotely close to in the conversation yet. But, in the next 2-3 years, I think, and I'm not calling for Coach Beamer's job. I'm not saying he should get fired here, but I'm saying the guys that he's recruiting and the progress that this program is making in recruiting and the culture and all that stuff, it is just starting to be implemented, right? Pup Howard, a lot of those guys, and Tree Babalade, Tro Baugh, among that mix of guys that Shane has brought in, that you get really excited about. Nick Harbor, DQ Smith, Nick Eamon-Wari. Those are guys that you're going to see like step up, and you've seen growth from them all already, right? All these freshmen, big steps from Tree and Tro, in my opinion. And Garrett, I'd love to get your thoughts on that after this, but I think that should give you some kind of hope, right? I know it's really hard to be positive when your team is 2-5 and 1-4 in the SEC, but we will get some positivity in there, because there is some positivity to be taken forward to. There is, all hope is not lost. I feel like we're nowhere close to where I remember I saw some comments talking about the Muschamp era and the last year of the Muschamp era. I think you're far from it, just because of how well you're doing in recruiting, and all these guys are starting to pan out. But Garrett, walk me through that.
Well, to continue on that concept, this is something that I got frustrated with whenever we were in the process of hiring Shane Beamer and kind of looking towards what we're going to go into. People forget that what Muschamp inherited was Spurrier's culture. That, players matter, but culture also really matters. What Muschamp inherited was a locker room full of good people that knew how to win games and wanted to win games. Shane inherited Muschamp's locker room, which is full of very, very bad recruiting and a lot of people that are used to pointing fingers. This is year 3, where you should have the juniors and seniors from the Muschamp era producing. We have none of them. We are surviving off of freshmen and sophomores that Shane has brought in. That sucks. Like, that's the testament to, like, if anything, this should make Carolina fans more frustrated with how much Muschamp sucked. You can't fix a program. And now, granted, I know, and this is where I get really, really frustrated, is look at, Miami, look at FSU, look at Duke. All these ACC programs that are doing so well, their NIL budget is kicking our butt. Like, it doesn't matter. They're bringing in the players to win games with. I mean, hell, look at Texas A&M and how many guys every year they bring in with all that Texas oil money. We don't have that money, and that sucks. It is what it is. We as Carolina fans need to understand that we are behind the 8 ball. It is what it is. Shane bringing in talented players is a great step one, but we can't expect to have talented freshmen and sophomores carry in an SEC schedule. It's just not, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't. And I love that point, right? Because the guys are all gone, most of out of the transfer portal. I guess really the only semblance of guys that are making an impact. Luke Doty, obviously off the field. But Dakarion Joyner is really one of the only guys. Boogie Huntley, sure, but it's tough. It is really tough when those guys aren't necessarily producing. But this upcoming, and it's never a bad time to talk about recruiting, or Garrett also brought it up, NIL-wise, we have the ticker on the bottom. You can head to garnettrust.com to figure out how to support a student athlete. But yeah, no, so I think bringing up recruiting, the Great Wall of Carolina, if you will, is on its way in. A lot of guys that should give you hope. Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson are the 2 main guys that are in that mix of the 2024 class. So far, so good. And then you already have Tree and Tro as well in there right now. But Garrett, kind of walk me through that a little bit. How does the hope lie? And what are you seeing from the recruiting class? And also, I guess, just the future of this offense.
If we can keep those kids there, I know we're going to have, not to give inside information, but we have a lot of guys on in the trenches that if we can keep them there, NIL or otherwise, it's going to really, really help our program. But you guys got to understand the reason why Jaheim Bell got paid to go to FSU was because he was so great for us at Carolina. It's not going to just be Jaheim Bell or whoever the heck that guy was who went to Southern Cal. Like, it's going to happen with our other good players. We've got a phenomenal D-tackle section, and we're going to start to have very, very good offensive line play. And I know people don't believe that now, but understand that, you know, if you're forcing freshmen to play in the SEC, they're just getting reps versus good people, live reps that we have to watch, which sucks. But, you know, we have some good O-linemen coming in. We've got a lot of good O-linemen right now that just need time to develop. You give those guys a couple years, and, you know, an O-line is the biggest lagging indicator of talent in all the positions. You know, Eamon Warwick, phenomenal player, has done very well for us. The fact that he can do what he's doing in that position is amazing. But you see freshmen and sophomores produce in the secondary. It's just a different skill set. Offensive line is a development thing. It is a strong, torque, loveful force in very isolated parts of the game. That is not a natural 18-year-old thing. That is more of a 20, 21, 22-year-old thing. If we continue to bring in these O-linemen, we might have one of the best O-lines in the SEC in 2-3 years if we keep them here and we keep putting talent around them for them to want to stay, as well as have the NIL to support it. You know, I'm watching these guys, and, you know, the amount of times where our linemen just make freshman mistakes, they're freshmen. You know, you can get as pissed off as you want to because you want to win. I hear you. But we're starting freshmen in the SEC next to a guy from Yale. Dude, that guy's playing phenomenally, but we're the SEC. We should have these third, fourth year, 5-star guys who should be the guys on the O-line. We're still making it work with a shell of what we need. It's great that it's functional, but the future looks so much brighter than what we're watching right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And, you know, this year was always going to be a building block year with all the offensive linemen that you brought in from the portal, and you knew you had this young crop of guys coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So that should give you hope. I think it's, you know, unfair to necessarily judge the whole Beamer regime based off of what you're seeing now. You know, because obviously this year isn't going the way you would want it somehow. I mean, Garrett, and you brought it up earlier, people were saying 10 wins. I'm somehow on the record saying 8 wins. And I don't think that was necessarily out of the question.
You idiot.
Yeah. Mike is going to be holding that over my head for a good little bit. But it's, yeah. Again, there was so much hope going into this year.
The reason why we felt that way, though, is that Shane's been out kicking his talent for years now. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's even more impressive to do that with the Muschamp guys. But he brought the excitement and the culture, and that has been carrying us. That only goes so far in the SEC. This stretch sucks. Like, I think people forget this, but there was one year, I can't remember what year it was. It might have been like 2012, but they did the football team's record the week after they played Alabama. It was one year Alabama won the national, and the teams were 0-12. It wasn't because of who they faced the week after. It was because they had to face Alabama the week prior. The Georgia game, I mean, we were up at halftime. Like, we gave a lot to try to win that Georgia game. But you're looking at all the games afterwards, and it was Georgia, Tennessee. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi State. I mean, those are a lot of very, very talented football programs that we've had to go through. And then you've got UF, and then you have this game, and then you have Texas A&M right afterwards. I mean, that is a murderer's row that I think most Power 5 programs would get stomped going through. But we have to figure it out. And especially with, I mean, I pulled this up earlier today. Our opposing our opponents so far this season, 33-7. UNC at 6-0, Furman 5-1, UGA at 7-0. Mississippi State is the only team that's mediocre at 4-3. But again, that's an SEC school in the West. Florida 5-2, Missouri 6-1. Like, we're not playing bums. We don't have Purdue and Illinois on our schedule. We've got to play good teams. And thank goodness, you know, we got Vandy and Jackson State down the road. Those are games that we should win. But this murderer's row of teams right now, like, I mean, come on, guys. Like, now listen, this isn't saying that, like, oh, the defense is playing good. Like, we should have better expectations. The defense thing is the defensive things. But you've got to understand this part of the season was going to suck. And people that saw it prior in the year were saying 8-10 wins is tough with this group.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I firmly agree. This is the hardest schedule in college football. And it's going to continue to be the way the SEC is shaking out. So it's going to be really, really tough. I mean, from here forward, but the only thing you can do is spot the football, right? You can't really complain about it. That schedules are made way, way out in the future. And I know Coach Tanner's office is certainly working on making the non-conference schedule a little bit easier, but you'll always have Clemson up there for that Thanksgiving game. And as long as Dabo is in charge there, I think they're going to get some notoriety, and it's still going to be a tough test, right? Like big one at home this year, and we'll get to that. But South Carolina has to go on the road at Texas A&M next week, and that is going to be a really tough game. Garrett, I don't know if you had the opportunity to play out there or not, but I've heard some bad things about Kyle Field and how hard it is to play in there. It's only going to get tougher than Mizzou.
Yep. I coached there when I was in New Mexico State. We had a game that was there. I got a couple good family friends that one family friend that's a booster over there. I know a good bit about it. It's a tough place. It's got to be hard as, like put yourself in Rattler's shoes. Like this man has to be perfect for 4 quarters or else the offense sucks, but you've got to go into all these games with the schedule to go win games. It's going to be another tough one. Honestly, I think that what we're left with the schedule going into, I'm pulling it up right now, but if we can, I was kind of in my mind, if we could kind of go 50-50 with Florida, Mizzou, Texas A&M, and Kentucky, we're in a really, really good spot. And the Texas A&M games will be tough. One thing I love about it, let me pull up Texas A&M schedule right now, but they're 4-3. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be very similar to Mississippi State, where this is not the season they're expecting. If we can come out early and we can get them frustrated, they will do what Mississippi State did, where they're going to start getting a little self-conscious of themselves. Now, it being at Texas A&M isn't great, but you got to understand, those fans are paying way more money than our fans are to win national championships every year. They're going to turn on their players as quickly as humanly possible. If we go out there and Rattler does good stuff and our defense gets any kind of stops, they're going to start booing. I'd put money on it. And if we can get their stands if we can remove the 12th man aspect, it might as well be a neutral field. And I think a neutral field, that program is struggling mentally with getting the job done, and we have a really good shot. Now, looking past that, we've got – pull it back up. Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Clemson. I still think Clemson's a very winnable game. That team is another team that is not feeling very confident about themselves. Kentucky is not having the year that they were hoping for. 5-2, it's going to be – I think the Kentucky game is going to be another Florida game. But if you look at this schedule, everyone should be pissed off right now. I'm never going to sit here and say, hey, guys, this is a good year. You should be stoked with 2 wins. No one wants that crap. But, in terms of what we've got left, we've got a lot of very attainable games. I was concerned about this Missouri game. I honestly was one of those people that thought we had a chance here. This was what an off night for our offense looks like. If Rattler is not perfect for 3 – how many games have we had where you hear, this is Rattler's first incompletion in, the end of the 3rd quarter? No other quarterback in the nation is doing that. This is what an off night for Rattler looks like, and he is still a mortal human, But in terms of what we got coming up, Texas A&M, Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, there's a possibility where we'll make a little bit of a run here where, yes, we'll still be concerned with Clayton's job, but if our offense can give our team some more confidence and the defense can just get the job done, give them, less time of possession than the offense on time of possession, we've got a good shot here for a bowl game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still within the realm of possibility. And I think, going out and making a statement against Texas A&M would be a big way to get it started. It's a noon kick. But again, on the road in the SEC, you got to start fast. You cannot play like you did today. You can't chase the lead, especially at, like Garrett mentioned, the 12th man at Kyle Field at A&M. It is not an easy place to play by any means. And that's what Tonka was saying for the Georgia quote that got misconstrued. He was talking about Texas A&M. So it's going to be a really tough one. They've hung around with some good teams. Jimbo knows himself some ball. So, it's going to be tough. Right, Jimbo, their team isn't great, but they've also hung with some really, really good teams. They almost won that Bama game. But then also you got Jacksonville State, you got Vandy. I haven't been high on Kentucky at all this year. I think they're pretenders. And they can get some stuff working, but I think it's kind of trouble in paradise. Things haven't gone exactly the way they've wanted, and Leary and Stoops need to figure that out before they get back to Columbia or head to Columbia for that.
Well, and that's another one of those programs that 18. They're ready for basketball season. The moment they have any kind of trouble, they turn. That fandom turns so quickly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that is kind of one of the reasons why Kentucky football gets the rep that they do, because those fans in BBN, and I'm not crapping on BBN if anyone's listening or watching or anything like that. But I mean, yeah, it does turn very quickly, and it is a very kind of cutthroat thing because your basketball team is so good and it's right there.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm not very high on their football team this year.
Mm-hmm.
But again, then you finish it out against Clemson. Very winnable games, but you're gonna have to fight. You really are gonna have to fight, and you need, again, we said this last week, got to come out and make a statement.
Mm-hmm.
Today, they certainly didn't. And that it just doesn't feel good, especially laying the goose egg offensively like you did at Missouri.
Yeah.
Garrett, what I guess you got any thoughts on like the offense just being able to move the ball? I know they struggled there. It was kind of
very. I've been reading through the comments, guys. I hear what you're saying. It's really funny. I love this because I hear you. Like I'm saying that Spencer had an off night because what were his statistics? I'm trying to pull them up right now, but I got him passing for 217.
23 of 40 with 217 yards and a pick.
Yeah. Like that's awesome at 99% of the programs. But if you pull up the other games where he's throwing for 345 and 353, his standard here is so much better than anything else. And I'm telling you, a lot of the wins that we've had have been predicated off of him being literally perfect. I say that in the sense that, like, not to say it's all on him. He's been Connor Shaw won us games because of his legs and the amount of times where he would get us out of 4th and 8s, and his leadership is unreal. And I think that's why he's into the next person with the retired number, is because of who he is. But in terms of quarterback play, Rattler this year has done stuff that I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback ever do. I think him not getting more national recognition is insulting. So whenever he is not, godly in his ability, we struggle from it. Now, one thing I will say, kind of get to the point to answer the question you're talking about. I think one thing that will be a testament to, do we have a good offense coordinator? Do we have a good defense coordinator? All that kind of stuff is going to be, what does our offense do next week? One thing that, and I have loved watching Satterfield suck. Just want to get that off my chest because as a Carolina fan, I've been saying Satterfield sucked for a long time, and it's good to watch Nebraska suck on offense because I knew he wasn't good. But one thing that I will say that that Loggins has done a great job of is that he's been very hard to guess. I'm watching what the defense is doing, what coverages are sitting in, and what they're doing pressure wise. And Loggins always seems to just be like, I don't want to say one step ahead, but like half a step ahead, enough to where we're tough to figure out. I felt like tonight we were a little bit easy to figure out. I'm not saying that Loggins is out of ideas, but I think that we were kind of going back to things that have been working. But the problem with that, though, is that since we're so untalented on the O-line and we're still working with Mario's been great. I'm not trying to dog Mario. Mario's been phenomenal. But Mario is not some 5-star running back. He's not going to break 15 tackles and score a touchdown. I think a lot of what the defense was seeing and what Missouri's defense was doing to us was they were prepared for what we have been doing that has been working, And I think that going forward, I would like to see Loggins be a little bit more creative, start to give us that, next level offensive coordinating to where we can really use what we've got. Another thing that we got to see, and I don't know how you do this as a coaching staff, but we got to get healthy. We need to have our talent at receiver getting a 5-man, 6-man box for us to run the ball. You got to have a balanced offense, and everyone knows that. But the only way you have a balanced offense is you got to keep them in 2 high, or at least a deep 1 high, where you can get the ball out to your receivers, be able to run the ball inside, and still be not one-sided. With us keep on having guys getting hurt, we got to get that figured out. I don't know if it's a lot more rest or whatever the hell it looks like, but we got to get that done. That's what I'm looking into going forward. I want to see us look like we have looked throughout the year, and I think that's going to be on the coaches to get that done. I hope Shane's a turd to everyone in the locker room and in the coaching rooms this week. I mean, got to be a manager. Go be pissed off. There were numerous times where we weren't getting it done when I was there with Spurrier, and Spurrier was tough to talk to. That's your job. Go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to see how far this culture, or how good this culture really is. These points are where you see, like, if you start to see guys not buying in and all this and leaving and jumping ship at this point, like, there's some issues there. But so, and like, this is the famed culture and Shane and everything that's changing. this is where you kind of see where it gets, if it's bad necessarily, without quite losing your job if you're Shane, right? Like,
Yep.
so if obviously things are going bad on the football field, so if guys are, jumping ship this early, which I don't think they are, and like I would be the first one to say, like, there are guys, taking plays off and all this and not buying in. I don't see that yet, because you got your butt kicked by Florida, and then Shane and everyone in the press conferences told us that you had the best week of practice that you had all year. So that says a lot. But again, like I'm anxious to see, like, because I personally, from what it has been built up to the media about, is that this culture can go and withstand the distance without some guys. And sure, right, you saw the Jaheim Bells and the Marshawn Lloyds, drop out of the culture last year, and that happens. You will have guys like that. But again, you're going to start to see, who's bought in and who's worth taking on to the next level. This is where you find the guys that really want to be here and really believe in change. So I think it's good, to have gut punches. It just stinks for South Carolina fans that the gut punch is lasting week after week after week, and that you just can't find any traction, right? Like it feels like, a NASCAR being held up in the air, if you will. Your tires are spinning and all that, and you just can't find the ground in enough spots to get where you're going.
Yep.
So with all of that, Jack Veltri has posted the injury. Oh, Garrett, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll just read through the comments, and I do want to say, I've liked this feedback. This is good. I'm not saying I want to agree with y'all, because I want to make sure I'm not getting misconstrued. Our O-line is rough. Yeah. I hope y'all hear that. Like, I have never said, guys, the O-line's good. No, the O-line is absolutely terrible. And I want y'all to understand that, like, we're still, and I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'll make sure I'm heard correctly, the O-line is not a very talented O-line. I think that, best example, if you've got a 5-year-old playing football and you put him out there on an NFL football field, what are your expectations of that kid in that situation? Your kid's going to suck. Your kid's going to get destroyed because he's out there with NFL guys. Our O-line is a very untalented O-line. And I'm never going to sit there and say, well, we should be expecting what Tennessee and all those other programs do with their very expensive NIL-laden O-line. No, our O-line is rough. And what Rattler's been able to do with the O-line that we've had has been very impressive. But no, to get to your point, and this is something I think, Brian Richardson made a good point. Loggins has done a great job using eye candy. And that's one thing that I felt like I didn't realize it until, you mentioned that, Brian. We have done a great job doing very, very short screen stuff. And I think that that's something that we haven't done a lot in the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if he's getting away from it to come back to it. But I think that the more that we use that short game, that screen stuff, essentially make it to where you get around having a garbage O-line, I think that's going to put us in a really good position as well. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to really start using more to get the games going right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up Dowell, because I forgot to talk about him last time we brought up. But I'm very impressed with everything that Dowell Loggins has done to this point. Job security is through the roof, right? He's adjusted week in and week out. And with the personnel that he's got, it's still staying within, what he's trying to do. But in going into this year, right, we knew he was a good recruiter. People liked him, all the good stuff coming out, about like how good his character is and all this. And like, because after that hire, I mean, Garrett, you were on Twitter during those days when it was, leaked that Dowell was interviewing for the job. And
I was one of the first ones saying, this guy could suck. But you look at his track record. And now that's the thing too, and I try not to, give people their credit, but the college industry is college and NFL, they will continually hire garbage people because they're friends. Yep. And that the best example of that was Shane talking about, we weren't the only guys going after Loggins. A lot of guys were. I hear that, but they're also, they hired Satterfield at Nebraska. He sucks. His track record sucks, but he keeps getting jobs. I mean, God, I was just trying to think of another person. There's plenty of coaches in this industry that keep getting hired. Getting hired means nothing. But what Loggins has done with this mediocre, to say it nicely, offensive line, with a running back stable full of guys who should not be in the SEC but are getting the job done. I hate saying this. I'm not trying to dog Mario. Mario has way exceeded his talent level. That man is playing way beyond his ability. And you got Carolina's program has been built. I mean, I'm blanking on the guy's name. The guy who played DN with me. Eric Norwood. Not a very talented human. Setting records in the SEC. That's what Carolina's built on. So don't hear what I'm not saying. Like, we have a lot of issues talent-wise, but Loggins has been able to use a less talented team to get wins out of games that we shouldn't have gotten wins out of. And someone mentioned too, what would we be without Rattler? We'd be a terrible football team without Rattler. Now, granted, will we have used that 1.7 mil in NIL to go in other positions? Sure, but has Rattler been phenomenal talent-wise for us? Yeah. And if that guy's not a day one guy in the draft next year, I don't know who's better, honestly.
Yeah, the Spencer conversation's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go. I've had the take where I think he's a day one draft guy, but also too, if
he's shorter.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I hear that.
There's a couple things that like I don't know if teams trust him, but all you need is one team, right? And I think, granted, where he stacks up to all the other quarterbacks in the country, I think he's way mature than Bo Nix. I think he's way mature than Shedeur Sanders. And then Caleb Williams. I watched him throw 3 interceptions in the first half in South Bend. So, like, I don't even know if I'm not high on him anymore. But quickly, before we get to this, just real quick, I wanted to update the injuries. Oh, all good. But so Jack Veltri posted the injury report over on GamecockCentral.com. You can go read it. But currently, Shane Beamer said after the game that Xavier Legette went down with an upper body injury. He went to the medical tent in the second quarter, didn't play another snap. No timeline on the return. And then Tree Babalade and Amarian Brown. Tree hurt his knee. Doesn't have an update on that one other than it's a knee injury, and they'll reevaluate it tomorrow when they get back to Columbia. And then Amarian Brown has a little bit of a hamstring, Shane said. No update on that either. I'm sure we'll find out more about that on Tuesday.
And Tree was doing this when he was talking to the trainer. I'm assuming his knee twisted in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
That could either be it feels weird, or that could be meniscus, that could be MCL. Yeah. Honestly, if it's MCL, PCL strain, he's back next week.
Yeah. It seemed
which,
like,
if anything, that might allot him a week of not having to practice, which sometimes you just need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I agree. I didn't seem like it was anything super big, as I'm knocking on wood here for everyone. Don't, come at me for not knocking on. But so I didn't look super bad for Tree. And again, Tree's a tough kid. We've seen that from him, and he's going to battle. He's going to fight. So I don't think it's anything serious for Tree. And then AB hamstring kind of looked like he pulled it a little bit, but he did not. I mean, he was really favoring it and got carried off. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll have to see about AB, but Eddie Lewis is going to have to step up in that situation. And Nick Harbor, thank God he's seeing the game a little bit better, because that helps at the wide receiver position. But yeah, man, yeah.
Look, there's not much good to say after these games, and I'm trying to be as positive as possible, guys. Look, there are certain times when we watch a Carolina game, and us fans should know this by now. You need to just turn the game off, go get some drinks, and go stop worrying about football for a weekend, because it's just going to suck. And now there's no fixing to that. But we're also might have a situation next week where we go to Texas A&M and just drag them. You know what I mean? Like, we have these back and forth. A month ago, we were almost able to beat Georgia. If we had the same second half that we had the first half, we beat the number 1 team in the nation at their house. Like, you're gonna have the good with the real bad.
Yeah.
Be frustrated, be pissed off, talk trash. Let's get ready for next week.
Absolutely. No, I firmly agree. And Skull, I brought up a question for you. Garrett, what made Connor so great, and does this team have anyone close?
At a certain point in time, you have certain players that are so far above the game. I'm going to compare Connor Shaw to Tim Tebow, and they are very, very different people. But sometimes people have the thing that you can't coach, that it's who they are. Connor, so I didn't play with Connor. Connor was a couple years after me. I got a couple friends to play with him. But for watching him and what he did, sometimes you have people that are phenomenal leaders, that are game makers, that it is naturally in them to be a leader with not only what they say, but what they do. He did everything right. He made the plays where we need to have the plays made. You can't make those people. You try to recruit those people, but you don't make those people. Now, and let's compare apples and bowling balls. Connor Shaw would probably not make some of the throws that Rattler made. And I know that's a very technical thing. I know a lot of people are going to say that. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But this is from people like Perry Orth, who know quarterback stuff. I'm just a big fat kid who played O-line. But in terms of how the ball comes off their hand, it's a different athletic ability. Rattler is very talented. The reason he was a 5-star guy and he did all the QB1 crap. He's very talented. Like, God gave him very particular talents in the way he throws. Rattler does not lead like Connor led. Those are very, very different things, and that is an internal thing. What's great about Rattler is that he's very talented, and usually talented people want to play around talented people. Connor was a generational talent for Carolina, and you just either you recruit those guys or you don't have them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and I think the way that Shane is recruiting right now, it should give you some hope that you're going to find some of those guys. Just the way that
Yep.
these freshmen have bought in, and I like this comment from Brian. Brian, you've been great all night. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for tuning in. He does have that ed factor, right? And he's matured a lot. And I have this conversation with my friends all the time, and my roommate who happens to be a Clemson fan, which isn't the most fun situation, but we talk about Spencer quite a bit, and I think the difference, and granted, like we get a different look at it in the media and that kind of thing, but I've seen maturity from even his time at South Carolina. I think he was very mature when he got here, but he was still trying to figure things out. This season is just, it's different. He knows, he's just smarter with the football. This game in particular, like I was looking for something. It's like, okay, that's a dumb decision. Like, that looked like this Spencer Rattler of old, and just like, here we go again kind of thing. But I've yet to see that. And I'm trying my hardest to like be a skeptic, but I have yet to be kind of proven wrong. Like, yeah, he makes a couple dumb throws and stuff like that, but the situation and stuff that you're put into to make some of those throws, it's just tough. It really is tough. So I agree. I think he has the it factor. Carolina Titan brings up, everyone seems to be better at development than us. Carolina Titan, I would agree and disagree here. I'm not trying to pick on you at all, but I think, defensively, at least we've seen, very, very big improvement. Especially in the DBs. Darius Rush was one of those guys, and Cam Smith even too, were two of those guys that were in the Muschamp era that produced for you last year in the development. I mean, they were studs when Shane got a hold of them, but man, the growth has been better. So Carolina Titan, my answer to that is just, patience, right? We talked about that earlier in the show as well. You got guys coming in that are going to have to learn. And linebacker, I'm going to pick on Pup Howard a little bit. Didn't have the best game today, hasn't had the best couple of weeks, but Pup, you can see, is learning. He's still bought in, and he's ready to go. And you're going to have to learn like that, in game, especially in the SEC, at linebacker like Pup is. So I would say pump the brakes a little bit. You're on, but you're just off. So always appreciate you tuning in as well. But
and to go to that point, this is something I from being in the college coaching realm and being around the strength staff situation. I got a good friend of mine, Tanner Marr. He's, I think, at BYU right now. He's a very, very, very good football coach or strength coach. What I think I found really, really funny, I know Luke Day relatively. I've not worked with him directly, but I know him relatively. One thing I find so interesting is that when you have soft tissue issues or you have slow development, strength and speed wise, everyone always goes straight to the strength and conditioning coaches. I have seen absolutely terrible strength and conditioning coaches with phenomenally developed players, and I've seen phenomenal strength and conditioning coaches with terribly developed players. I think a lot of our development stuff, there's going to be a cultural aspect to that. There's going to be a talent aspect to that. If you're in a room of guys who don't want to work, you're naturally not going to work. If you're in a room of guys who want to work, you're going to do more. I mean, that's every, muscle gym in America. If you're around guys that are trying to go squat 1,000 pounds, you're going to have a better day. I don't put that on our staff as much as we might need just better guys in there who want to be better, who want to win. I think one thing that people kind of forget, but what made the Spurrier era so great was that he brought in guys who just wanted to be great. I remember, meeting Ace Saunders at Andy's Deli, and phenomenal, nice human. And everything I heard about him was that when he went into the weight room, he got after it. He worked hard. That was part of Spurrier's recruiting mentality. You want to get good people that want to just be great. I think Shane's getting those guys in, but you got to understand that, yes, it is year 3, but you don't really get your full culture in 3 years. I know we got the FSU, Miamis, and Dukes of the world right now. And granted, I'm saying ACC because it's the ACC. It's not the SEC. It matters. Yeah. But they bought those programs. And what's funny, though, is that Texas A&M also bought their program. How are they doing? You don't have any idea how much NIL money they're putting in to get 4 wins right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say 10 times what we're paying. They don't have a culture of development either right now. They suck, So I think that we got to give a little more time, give a little more money, but be frustrated. Not saying you're wrong, but there's just so many other aspects to this than just go out there and win.
Yeah. And right now it is recruiting that is sticking the glue in this whole thing together. And
Right.
you're right about Texas A&M, man. That's a really, really, really good point because they had a lot of it's you got to have all of it, right? I think culture is a very big element to this, and getting good players in, but it's not just the NIL bag. I know sometimes it can be all in on NIL, and that's what the story of recruiting and a good program in college football. But I think the Texas A&M analogy and other places too, Florida even,
Mhm.
you are seeing that it's just not the NIL bag that's going far. You need a culture and that kind of thing. And again, this culture, to me, and we'll talk about where they go. We'll transition into just where do you go from here, right? But
Yeah.
so to me, at least, you have to rely on the culture of this team. We've heard how good it is, and I'm tired of hearing how great it is and under Coach Beamer. It's so much different. This is where you show me that, right? Like I said earlier in the show, seeing the guys that are bought in. You need your guys to go to the end of the season like you did last year, right? Where
Mhm.
you did what you did in the last couple of games, and you have the chance to end the year on a positive note. You got Kentucky, three games or 4 games to finish off the year at home. So you're playing in front of your home fans. It's to your advantage. Yeah, they're tough games, but that's just how it is, right? So I think this culture, the culture is a big thing going forward. You got to show me that you're still bought in, because if there are guys that are checking out now, that's something to be concerned about. And I don't necessarily think that is a problem yet, like I said, because I think last week's
Yeah.
practice was good. I think, there weren't a whole lot of guys just giving up just yet. So I think that's a positive sign. But where do you go from here, right? For me, it's
No, that's a
you
great
need.
question, and you bring up a really good point. This is going to be, I think, what's going to be really interesting about college football, and I think you've seen a couple things happen here at Texas A&M where, and hell, Colorado's another phenomenal example. You can buy a good football team for a year, but what does that team look like when things get tough? This is where it kind of goes into the let's call it old school versus new school, because there's not a better term for it, but the old school of 5 years ago, where you had a program that believed in the head coach, believed in the players and the coaches that were going to win the game. And when times got tough, do you believe in the guys around you, or do you look for greener pastures? And especially in the NIL world, there's always going to seem like there's greener pastures everywhere else.
Yeah.
This is where, hey, this is suck. You guys are 2-5. Everyone's going to tell you suck on Twitter. Hell, half the people in the chat are going to DM these players and tell them that they suck. Go cuss at a 19-year-old. That's the world we live in right now. If you want to see if this culture is better than other people's cultures and it's going to produce a winning situation, this is going to be the week to see it. You're going to have to go into Texas A&M, where with a much bigger NIL budget and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to have to go dog those dudes. But this is going to be an interesting situation. If we watch Texas A&M and the first quarter, everyone just kind of checked out, we got problems. And that's going to be a conversation for the postseason if we do. But if we go out there and put out a fight, win, lose, or draw, if we go out there and fight, we have a good program and we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and we've seen it, right? The reason why I'm still kind of optimistic about this team, and the reason why I said 8 wins, is because you can very easily, put it together that this team could win games, and they have talent, and there are guys that are good enough. They just have to put it together. And granted, with where they're at depth wise, you're gonna have to play a perfect game across the board. But going into the season, you knew you're gonna be tight on depth, and you knew it was going to be hard, so you have to play a close to perfect game. But now you need to just play well in all phases, no mistakes, and just go out and just beat a team straight up. And that's the nature of your schedule nowadays too. Is you need to go up and just beat them flat out, just from front to back, just beat the brakes off this team. And they got to do it at Texas A&M because it's a turning point. And if this week wasn't as much of a turning point, because Missouri's good, but again, you were in this game. You could have won this game. It didn't feel like Georgia
Especially
in the second half. You couldn't stop a nosebleed. It's so tough. Right, you had it, and so you're in these games, and that should frustrate you too. But you're in these games, and it shows that you can hang with the big dogs. I think you very easily could have beaten Georgia. It wasn't out of the question. You just needed to throw a better second half performance. So at this point, this is where the learning curve starts to catch up with you, right? It's all right, these guys have been in, they've been in the lineup, they've had time to learn and all this stuff. And so this is where you got to start performing, both coaching wise, schematically, and players, right? It's put up or shut up time. And we said that after last week, and yeah, there were flashes, right? And so maybe there's a little bit more going down the stretch, but you need to find a way to get something going right before you gotta, you have to win the next, or the last 4 home games, because the last one, you're going to give your rival a chance to spoil your bowl eligibility, right? So you like to take the one at Texas A&M just in case things don't go right against Clemson, because they're probably, in my opinion, after A&M is probably the most, skilled opponent on your schedule after that point in the 4-game home stretch. So you like to take one against Texas A&M so that way you're not relying to win 4 straight to make bowl eligibility. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and I think, one thing I do want to point out too, and you made some good points, and it kind of made me think of the fact that, like, I think what made Kirby Smart so great at Georgia, right off the bat, was that Kirby was around a lot of very good head coaches, and he got to see what a lot of guys did in the heat of the moment. And I think one of the things that I thought was so impressive about Kirby Smart in the National last year was that, I can't remember exactly the situation, so this is going to be a terrible paraphrase and a terrible example, but there's a moment where the offense was about to do something that he was realizing was going to cause a touchdown, and he was in full panic mode, getting people in the right position. And the announcers broke down what he saw and what they shifted to stop what they were doing. But the only reason that Kirby knew that was coming was because he had been around Nick Saban and a lot of these phenomenal coaches and how to change the game and do the halftime adjustments the right way. This is not saying that Shane sucks in any way, but I'm not sure Shane has been in those situations with those coaches. And so I think this Missouri game, as much as we don't want to admit it, I think Shane is also having some learning curve situations here as well. I think this is a game where you go into the game and you're out coached. And I think that you did make good halftime adjustments, but not good enough. And I think this is where, yes, you're going to go coach practice differently, but they don't show up at, 2 o'clock to go do practice for 2 hours. Like, they're there from 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 6 a.m., all the way until 10 o'clock at night sometimes. They're going to be in the office. I think this is where this coaching staff really needs to sit back and go, hey, watch the whole game 3 times a day for the next 4 or 5 days. What did we do right and what did we do wrong, and how do we adjust better as a staff? And I think if we start to see that progression too, that's going to be a real sign as to, is this a good coaching staff, or are we just going to be mediocre?
Yeah, and it's going to continue, right, if this defense doesn't step up. And like I said on my podcast too, it's like this defense just needed to be good enough just to win you the game, right? Make those couple stops down the stretch just to win you the game. But in this game, you found out that they needed to make stops early to get the offense going, because the offense came out flat. And so, again, you're missing on every phase, and it stinks when you can't get it together, because it's like, pulling a lawnmower that just won't start. Like, you're getting close and you're getting closer and closer, but then you just can't get it all together and get it started, So that's where I'm at with the South Carolina team. You've got a lot of work to do, and you would have hoped, right, Garrett, that they would have reconvened and done, the reevaluation in the bye week. And I think they did that. They missed some spots, right? Like they weren't coaching it right. And Tonka Hemingway talked about the difference between pressures and blitzes, and that's something that the defensive line has to work on. I think, and there is a difference, and I would be misquoting Tonka if I tried to, elaborate on what he said, because he gave a really good answer. But you need to hit home better. And sure, Missouri's offensive line has been great. Brady's been throwing for a bunch, but it's the SEC. Again, it eventually becomes put up or shut up time. You have what you got, and you need to make something out of the season. And I feel like that's where we are at this point, is like, all right, all the excuses are out the window at this point. You need to step up and play better, or something is going to happen.
Right. Let's pull up Missouri State real quick, because I wanted to see that. So they had South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Kansas State, Memphis, Vandy, LSU, Kentucky, then us. I'm going to be honest with you. They haven't faced the schedule that we have faced. I think LSU is a pretty decent team. They beat Kentucky 38-21, but, I would love to play Memphis this year. I would love to play MTSU this year. The Kansas State game, I still think I am very biased towards the SEC. I know my blind spots. I think the SEC is way better than most other conferences. So all that to be said, I think compare their schedule to our schedule. I think, if we play that game at our house, I think that's a different outcome. I'm not sure if we win the game outright, but I do think that it's a different outcome. Again, man, I think the schedule just sucks. But, I still think that game goes differently if it's at home. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, but just the point I was just thinking of.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think playing on the road in the SEC is so tough, and The fact that that game is at noon next week, I think that gives you more of a chance than it does at night, which is crazy because I have a stigma around noon games in conference going on the road. If you're the away team in a noon kick on the road in conference, good luck. But I think Kyle Field is just so dynamic at night that to catch it at a noon game, they're woken up and everything, but I don't think it has the same, energy as it would if it were at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. If you let those fans, sit out there and tailgate all day.
I mean, perfect example that I have. I think our stadium is one of the toughest places to play. But in my 4 years in Carolina, we lost to Vandy at a noon game, and I remember being in the cockabooses at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, thinking, "What the hell just happened?" But it's because especially for the SEC, I think 3:30 can sometimes be better than the night games. But our night games in the SEC, especially with the lights, that matters. I think us being there at noon, I think that's absolutely going to be to our advantage for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it take the energy out of the crowd early and often is the main thing. Garrett, any final thoughts before we hit the ads and close her down?
I got nothing. I will say, guys, as a Carolina fan, being on both sides of the stadium, this sucks. Be pissed. It's hard to, when I was watching the game, I made this joke with my wife earlier. What do you say after these kind of games? These suck. But at the end of the day, I staunchly believed when I knew when the Muschamp era was over. I could see the writing on the wall when the Spurrier era was heading out. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of the Shane Beamer era. I hope that Clayton gets it figured out. And if he can't, I hope that we pull the trigger quickly, because I know that's where a lot of coaches really, really mess up. And I hate that, because I hate that for any coach's family. But at the end of the day, this is a multi-million-dollar industry. They'll be fine. Otherwise than that, I really hope we have a good Saturday next Saturday. Yeah,
absolutely. My final thoughts from this one, and I feel like I'll one more brush over it after the ads real quick. But yeah, this one's tough, right? And we'll look ahead, I guess, after the ads. But yeah, this one is very, very tough. You wanted, for South Carolina fans especially, because you needed a response to that Florida game, and then a response delayed from the Tennessee game, and you just haven't gotten it yet. And you hear, great week of practice and like all this stuff and how the team's morale was great. And coming into this one, you felt good about it. And then you lay a goose egg. You can't score a touchdown. Mitch Jeter goes crazy with the field goals and stuff. But it's just very, very tough to be able to do that. Yeah. South Carolina needs to keep their heads up if they expect to salvage this season, which is crazy. And I did not think I'd be saying that up until this point. Like you if you weren't up against the wall, before this, you are furthermore up against it now. You are staring bowl eligibility right in the face. Quite literally, you need to win 4 out of your next 5 to be bowl eligible, and one of them is against your arch rival Clemson at home. So there are a lot of things that they have to tune up. But first, let's get to our ads real quick. Our first ad of the night comes from our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call it on the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to Liberty Tax Team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. When you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now, 803-462-5576. Once again, on your screen right now, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs. And our second sponsor, as always, is our good friend over at Clint Hammond. You can find his number above us. Go visit him at clint.hammond.com of the Movement Mortgage Network. Need help with your mortgage? Call our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance, nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with 5-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth with their mortgages. So give our guy Clint a call. Once again, he's always above us on our Gamecock Central Live programming, 803-771-6933. Once again, still on your screen, 803-771-6933. So Garrett, any messages of hope for those of our viewers still watching?
Interesting week to see what the players say, what the coaches say. It's got to get through the week and ignore football until next Saturday. Hopefully we have something to cheers to next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank the Holinskis for hope never sinks, because South Carolina fans will be holding on to some hope headed down the stretch. You need a couple big games to maintain bowl eligibility. We will see. But everyone who tuned in tonight, thank you so much. We always appreciate it. You can catch my podcast, The Walkthrough with Intern Joe. Tomorrow should be live around 6 or 7. That is the goal, at least. So tune into that live on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast platforms. Also great. Listen on your drive to work on Monday morning. But that is Garrett Anderson. I am Intern Joe. Thank you guys for tuning in. You guys can also rewatch this whole thing on our YouTube page, or I believe you can also get it on the podcast platforms. So go watch, re-listen if you missed any of us today. Thank you again for tuning in. You guys try to have a good night. Mix in the water.